Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Hey, do me a favor. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for the notifications. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you do that 5-star. Hey guys, if you can't get up in the morning and you need a pick me up, I'm telling you now, Blackout Coffee. The coffee for America's warriors. That's right, America's warriors. It's the Be Awake, Don't Be Woke coffee. Tons of flavors, great taste, amazing coffee. So go to www.blackoutcoffee.com and at checkout, punch in Everyday BS. That's right, Everyday BS. So get yourself some. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. First off, I want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch, retired, for his service and for coming out, hanging out with me. We had the most amazing conversation, which you guys are about to listen to. Second of all, I want to say I am sorry about the video quality on my end. The Colonel looks great. Audio on both of us sounds good. So please stick around through the whole video. It gets a little bit clearer towards the end on my end. So thank you so much. And also, don't forget to check out the Colonel's book. The link is in the description of this podcast. Peace. Tennessee? Or
no, I was born in Tennessee, but I grew up in northern Illinois.
Okay.
I grew up in a small little farm town, 1,200 people, called Kirkland, right in between Rockford and DeKalb. And I worked on farms the whole time I was a kid until I went in the Army. That's about all I did was work on farms. So, yeah, it was a great place to grow up. I don't want to live there anymore, but because I certainly don't want to live through those winters anymore.
Yeah, winters are rough.
Yeah,
they're rough. You did all that farming as a kid?
I worked on farms. My parents didn't have a farm, but
so you just worked.
Yeah,
all the way up until you decided to go.
Yeah, until I was 18 when I graduated from high school and went in the Army.
Really? Did you go OCS?
No? I did 2 years at West Point.
Okay.
Didn't graduate from West Point. My father bought a bar in that small little town. There were 3 bars in that 1,200 people town. And he got sick, so I came home and ran the business for about 18 months. And then I finished up in ROTC at Northern Illinois University, which was about 12 miles from where I lived. And that way I could still come work the bar when he needed me to and those kinds of things. And that's where I met my wife, so it worked out well. That's where I met my wife. Yeah.
I owned a bar in Titusville for a short little while. Yeah. And I ran a car club at the time, at a car club, because I love old cars. Yeah. And her and her roommate would come in and hang out, and we just got talking and connected. And the best thing ever happened to me.
Yeah. Well, why my wife married me, I have absolutely no idea.
And it's crazy because I'm almost 10 years older than my wife, and but I talk about certain things, and she tells me, when you get really pissed off, your Philly accent comes through, and you hear the North in me come out.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh. So, Oak, how are you? You good? Good. Thanks again for doing this. And you're retired Lieutenant Colonel,
right?
United States Army, and an author of this beautiful book I picked up, Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. What got you doing that?
So, I guess I wanted to write that book for a while, but my last assignment on active duty, I ran an Army ROTC program at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And because of that, I did all my own recruiting, and I'd go around the high schools and talk to college kids too. And I'd always ask them, so what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And they'd tell me what profession. And I said, and I want to be a leader. And I said, so what does that mean? What does that look like? And you get that deer in the headlights look. You know, they had no idea what being a leader meant or what it took to be one.
Right.
And they probably wanted to do it for the wrong reasons. They probably wanted it because of the title or the privileges or better pay.
Yep.
And let's face it, leaders get those things, and that's okay, as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader.
Exactly.
If that's the only reason you want to be a leader, please go do something else, because you're not going to be a good one. So I came up with this talk that kind of explained what good leaders do. No theory in my talk. It's just all everyday things that leaders have to do to be good.
Mhm.
And I've been giving that talk since probably 2004.
Really?
And, you know, I've added to it and changed things, whatever, but
You
it's,
got to adjust with the times.
yeah, absolutely. And who the audience you're giving it to and all
Yeah.
that. But the talk is pretty much, you know, the principles are all the same. And so I always thought, well, I want to write that book. And I just turned that talk into that book and added a few things because obviously,
Yeah,
you can't talk about everything in that book in an hour.
But one of the things I love about this book, the quotes. You got to you have some amazing quotes in there, and from all kinds of people,
right?
And it's fantastic, and it's a lot of motivating quotes,
right?
What generated, you know, the thought of like, hey, you know what, I'm going to start putting these in my book.
Yeah, well, I've been collecting quotes since I was in high school, probably. You know, I keep a journal.
Right.
I actually have a couple of journals, but I have a daily journal, but I have a leadership journal. And every time I read a book, I've got my journal out there and I write down things that kind of strike me. And quotes is one of those things. And so I probably got, I don't know. That's going to be another book I'm going to do is put all the quotes that I've collected in a book. Yeah. But you know, when I went to write that book, I pulled out a bunch of them, but I wanted to make sure that the quotes fit what it was I was trying to talk about. I just didn't pick my favorite quotes and put in there. I actually did some thinking behind it and tried to make it fit.
And they do. Some of the areas that you placed them were phenomenal. Leadership is not about titles, positions, or flow charts. It's about one life influencing another. John C. Maxwell.
Yeah.
Fantastic quote, man.
Absolutely.
And it's there. It's strong.
And it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just because you got a title doesn't make you the leader. You're not the leader until the people you're leading decide you're the
exactly.
leader. Sorry, you may have the title, but you're not their leader.
Let's jump back a little bit before your book. So 23 years, am I correct?
That's right.
US
23
Army.
Years on active duty.
And you were there for Shield and Storm.
Right. Yeah, I think I was in the 24th Infantry Division, and we were the second Army unit to get there. The 82nd got there before us.
Right.
And then we were in right behind the 82nd. So we got there in August of 1990. You know, it's funny because I was sitting on the sofa with my wife and we're watching the news, and all of a sudden it pops up that Saddam Hussein has invaded Kuwait. And I got up and I started walking. I walked into my room where I kept all my field gear and I started packing my stuff. And my wife said, "What are you doing?"
"We're going."
I said, "I'm going to Saudi Arabia." And she said, "No, you're not." I said, "Hun, we are the only division in the United States Army that our vehicles are painted brown. You don't think we're going?" And like 3 hours later, I got the alert call.
Yeah. Wow. That there. And what was going through your mind?
You know, as a young lieutenant, you know,
right.
you have no idea what warfare is about. And it's, you know, so it's all kind of glorified. But, you know, so I people ask me if I was scared. I don't think I was scared. You know, I certainly had, my wife was 7 months pregnant. We had our 18-month-old son already, and she was still on active duty as an Army nurse working full time. So I certainly had concerns about her and the kids. But I, you know, I tell people is, look, she definitely had it harder than I did. Yeah. I was out there doing what I wanted to do,
right?
You know, lead soldiers in combat. I mean, you don't get any better than that as a young infantry officer. So
what stands out the most when you got over there?
So when we first got there, you know, I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, so it was hot.
Yeah.
But when I got there and the ramp of that 141 dropped and that air hit you, it was like walking into an oven.
Really?
Dry, just hot. I mean, just hot. And I think that hit me really right at the beginning. But then what I think really hit me was just the difference in culture. You know, I had never been outside the United States at that point.
Yeah.
That was my first time being outside the United States and seeing other cultures.
How old were you?
Let's see, that was 1990, so I was 27.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you're young, man.
Yeah.
You're just still like a baby in some sense.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. I still, I came in on active duty in August of 87. So I'd only been on active duty for about 3 years when that happened.
Yeah, I'll be 50 this year, and I remember watching all that on the tube.
Yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. I mean, CNN.
Yeah, I think so.
That's really when it took off. I think that it really grabbed everybody's attention, because at that point, I think that was the only 24-hour news channel.
You know, it's so weird you say that, because I look back from when I was growing up. I remember when the TV went off after
played the national anthem, the TV went off.
Man.
Yeah,
and it stayed fuzzy until I think it was like maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then if you were lucky, you got some cartoons before mom or dad took over the TV for something, for a program.
Well, I remember where I grew up when I was a kid. We only had, and we were lucky because I lived pretty close to 90 miles from Chicago. So I had 5 TV stations. Most places only had 3, maybe 4. You know, I had ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS.
Yeah, the public broadcasting.
But then we also had WGN because we were close to Chicago, and that's the mega station out of Chicago that everybody can watch. Which I think why there are a lot of Cubs fans all over the world, because they could watch on WGN as a, And so I actually had 5 TV stations when that was rare. Now, how many are there?
Oh,
thousands.
Yeah. You can get your own right now on a Roku TV if you wanted to.
Exactly.
You know, it's crazy.
It is.
That just the way the tech, I mean, God, man, remember when a TV weighed like 8,000 pounds?
Yeah.
And it
was in a console.
It swiveled or whatnot. Oh my God. But yeah, and then today, man, it's so funny that you can watch TV from this little guy right here now. It's just amazing. From those big old glass tubes that glowed orangey red to
what's in your pocket.
Exactly. And they're smaller than this now too. It's crazy. So it's like, you look at the technology that we have now, and some of the things that we have now, how well do you think that would have helped during the time of, Shield and Storm?
So I think there are lots of things that the military uses now that would have been helpful, but you also got to remember that even during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were using equipment that had never been proven in combat.
Right.
We had 5 things that in the Reagan years he brought into the Army that proved absolutely phenomenal during the war. The Abrams tank, the Bradley, the Apache helicopter, MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, and the HEMTT, the truck that we used. All of those were, I mean, that was the first time they'd been used in combat, and they all proved to be pretty good. And and we just started with GPS. In fact, we got Loran. We didn't even get the GPS, so we were using what the ships use. But you could use them far enough inland that we could use them, which helped out a lot in the desert. I mean, because this piece of sand looks like that piece of sand, like that piece of sand. I mean, it was, as flat as this tabletop.
It's funny you talk about that. So I had a friend of mine. He's retired tech sergeant, Air Force, and I did a podcast with him when I was up in Michigan. He said one of the things that stood out to him was the sand, the mud. The Iraqi sand mud. He said it was ungodly. It was horrible.
But I think one of the things one of the problems we have in the military right now is the over reliance on technology. Young kids today can't pull out a map and a compass and navigate anywhere. And the radio systems that we use are so complex that if somebody jammed those radios, to go back to manual would be. I don't know that they could. I mean, they'd figure it out eventually, but it's you got to be careful because any technology, as good as it is, can be taken away from you.
I've taught my son how to use a compass.
Yeah.
Being involved with the Scouts.
Yes.
And whatnot, and we all did that. But they showing them the proper north point and whatnot, and longitude, latitude, and
so many kids today don't get that.
No,
and
they don't.
Well, part of the thing is most kids today they're not in Scouts. Mm-hmm. They're not in anything outside of their bedroom watching whatever they watch on.
Yeah. Playing their games.
Yeah.
My son is one of those.
Oh, my son played his games, but I made it a requirement.
Yeah.
When he was growing up, both my kids, my son and my daughter, they both had to play one sport during each season. So I wouldn't let them play more than one. So, my son played soccer, he wrestled, he played football 1 year. He played a little bit of baseball, but I always made him play one sport. And I encouraged them to be part of Scouts or Air Patrol or whatever. Yeah. Just so they could learn some of those life skills that they would need.
I did scouting all growing up, and one of the greatest things, was for me was the summer camp.
Right.
Being able to get away for a whole week without mom and dad and going in
helps you grow up.
It does. And there were so many great things, man. There was fishing, there was, canoeing, there was sailboating. But now today, a lot of the scouting there's 4-wheelers now.
Yeah.
There is motorboats. There's all kinds of, we have a sea base here.
Okay.
For Scouts. It's in, I believe it's down in the Keys.
Okay.
But they have a sea base down there, and you can go down there, you can camp and everything, and they do it all. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So that was obviously after my time. But even after my kids' time, my son's 35, my daughter's 33, so it's been a while since they were in any of that. But I think it's important, and I wish more parents would push their kids into stuff like that.
It's not a military thing, but it shows them how to properly do a good uniform, how to put it together, what to wear, what not to wear, and they do teach them a lot, some of the basics that you almost would learn during going through basic training.
It teaches them some discipline,
self-discipline, and a lot of that.
And I think that's the key. When people talk to me about discipline, I say, discipline is good.
Yeah.
And to a certain point in your life, you need to have discipline. But if you really want to move to that next level, you got to have self-discipline.
Yes.
Not because somebody's watching you or going to stand over you and make you do something. You have to do it because it's the right thing to do, and it needs to be done. And I think that's the key to life, self-discipline.
Yeah.
And here's one of the reasons, in fantasy land, you wake up every day and you're motivated. That's not called the real world.
Right.
There's going to be days when you're not motivated to do what you should do.
Right.
If you are self-disciplined, then your self-discipline will make you do the things you would have done if on those days that you're unmotivated, that you would have done if you'd been motivated.
There is a quote by Jocko. Good. Have you ever listened to that?
I listened to a couple of his shows.
Okay,
but I read his first book. I haven't read his second book, but I read his.
I've read them both. They're phenomenal. Yeah. The Extreme Ownership. I read that, and the Dichotomy.
Yeah.
And actually, I got them for my wife because she had to use them for work. She's a manager.
And she uses them as
there's
professional development.
Yeah. So a group of them get together every Tuesday morning. And they do a Zoom meeting, and they go through and they discuss a certain chapter of a book. Right now, I forget. They're on a book, something, Don't Eat a Frog or something like that.
I've had a couple companies that have used my book for that purpose as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is very similar to
it is.
Getting that that ownership, that mentality of hey, look, you want to push forward. Here's some of the things that could help you do that.
Right.
Focusing on your group, because you talk a lot about your relationship with organizations such as the food bank.
The food bank, yeah.
You were with.
Yeah.
So,
you don't get any different than that, huh? Combat arms officer running a food bank. That's 180 degrees difference.
It is. So you end up, how long did you stay over in Desert Storm?
9 months.
9 months.
Yeah.
You get back home after that and kind of get back into the swing of things.
Well, and that wasn't easy.
No.
Because here you not just my wife or somebody's husband, but all the spouses had gotten so used to living without you that
shit, you're coming home.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it was quite like that, but you got to get back into the family life.
Yeah.
I didn't even see my daughter till she was 5 months old when I got home.
Wow.
Because of course we didn't have cell phones with
Yeah.
videos and everything like that. So I fully expected that my son, who at that point was just over 2.5, and my daughter wouldn't have anything to do with me. I had already come to that conclusion. Luckily it didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, they ran right. He ran right up to me, and she jumped right in my arms.
Oh.
So that was a pleasant surprise. But I had expected that wasn't going to happen. And a couple times I'd start to do something, and my wife would say, I do that now. And I said, okay.
Oh man. But that had to feel good though.
It did.
In some sense.
It did.
It's just
and on my future deployments, then I didn't have that worry anymore. I knew that they could do.
She was strong enough and was capable enough to run the household.
She was going to do whatever she needed to do.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And is she retired as well from the military?
No, she was in for 8 years.
Okay.
And then we had both our kids, and she realized that if she hadn't been pregnant during Desert Storm, she would have been deployed as well, and then we would have had to find someone to take care of our son.
She's a nurse.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing.
Yeah. So she got out not too long after I got back. Her time was up and she got out. And I always tell people she was probably a better leader than I was. She would have.
Was she an officer as well?
She was. She went through ROTC, the same ROTC program I did, and we met there. And then she got out as a captain. So she actually outranked me. She got commissioned 6 months before me, and so she always outranked me until she still outranks me. When I made major, somebody said, "Well, you finally outrank your wife," and I said, "Look, that's never. I could make 4-star general, and I'm not going to outrank my wife. I mean, let's be honest."
Oh man, 23 years. That's a long time. Okay, that's a long time.
It was a long time. And I tell people I loved every minute of it. And if you add up all my time as a cadet, in the National Guard, because when I was in college, I was in the Illinois National Guard for a couple of years while I was in college. And you add up active duty, and then my 14, 15 years as a government service officer for the Department of the Army, helping to recruit at Embry-Riddle. About 40 years is what I gave to the Army in one way or another. And I loved doing it. When people thank me for my service, which I appreciate, I always tell them, look, it was a privilege and an honor to serve the people of this country. It really was. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. I did my basic at Fort Leonard Wood.
Lost in the Woods.
You got it, brother. And they were.
I've never been there. My wife has.
So it's funny because when you go and you go in through reception, they take you to the old World War II barracks.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was crazy because it was wide open showers.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And
wide open bathroom.
Yeah, everything.
There were no stalls.
No, there was no stalls whatsoever. But yeah, and all I can remember, God almighty, was the steps. So you would go up one set of steps, you go over a road, and then back down the other side. And it was just, it was tedious.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And the funny thing is, going in, I remember, so I had a buddy of mine who was a former drill sergeant. And he got me in shape before I went.
Yeah.
He's like, listen, I'm going to give you some tips, some pointers. We're going to get you down weight. Preparation H, saran wrap, wrapped me up, dropped me off 3 miles from my house. I got home and I dropped the weight that I needed to get into the in. I had my sit-ups down, my and my push-ups down, all that stuff. I just needed to drop a little bit of weight, just because at that time, they wanted you at a certain, standard.
Yeah.
So I did that. Then he broke things down for me. He's like, listen, I'm going to give you little pointers on what you're going to need to bring. And he's like, running shoes, get yourself a good pair of running shoes, because if you're not, they're going to take it out of your first paycheck. Flashlight, I'm like, you bring a flashlight? He's like, yeah, military grade flashlight with all the little discs. I got one of those, packed up one of those.
Yeah, you get those at any
Army Navy store.
Yeah.
Shine kit. He's like, good shine kit, good brushes, because you're going to be needing those. And he wasn't lying.
Yeah.
And shine kit, white socks, plenty of running socks, and all that, and shave your head. Take it, bick it to the end, and about 2 days before you leave, it'll start nubbing up. And when you get there, they're going to check your hair and see, because you got to pay for your first haircut too. And I still have my card that they gave me with Fort Leonard Wood on it with a little chip. So here's a portion of your first paycheck. We want you to buy this, and that. I bought stamps and envelopes, cashed it out, sent it home to the wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were married at that point.
I was married before. Yeah. And it was eye-opening. It was a lot of fun. And I went through with a lot of ex-Navy. A lot of Navy guys were coming through.
Okay.
And they were going through basic. And
they'd already been to.
They've already been to a
Navy
basic. Navy basic. Yeah. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
So, but where did you spend a majority of your station?
So we moved about every 2 years.
Okay.
Once my first deployment, my first duty station, as a lieutenant, I did from second lieutenant to right before I made captain. That was all Fort Stewart.
Okay.
So that was 87 to December 91. And then I went to Fort Lee for 6 months, and then I went to Fort Knox, and I was there for 3 years. And that's where I did my 2 company commands. One of them was a basic training company command.
Okay.
Which I kind of talk about in the book a little bit. And the other one was a headquarters company. So I had 375 soldiers. So I think I was signed for like $252 million worth of equipment. I mean, it was at 34 years old. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That you have somebody that young, that kind of responsibility. And then from there, I went to Fort Irwin, California, out in the middle of nowhere. We used to call it, my wife and I used to call it the world's longest cul-de-sac, because there was one way in, one way out. And it was 34 miles long.
Really?
So 34 miles from, I think it's I-5. I think that's the interstate that runs right by there. And then you turned off onto the Fort Irwin Road and you drove for 34 miles before you hit the post. And then 12 miles from Fort Irwin was Death Valley. So, I mean, you were really out in the middle of nowhere. And then from there, I went to Aberdeen Proving Ground for a couple years. I ran the leadership and tactics department there. And then, and from there, while I was there, I did 6 months in Germany alone. The wife and kids stayed at Aberdeen. I went to Germany on a TDY, and then went back to Germany with everybody, the whole family, to Vilseck, Germany. And I was there for 2 years. 9 months of that was Kosovo. And then from there, went to Leavenworth, spent 3 years at Leavenworth as a student. And then I also taught there a couple of years. And then I taught at the Australian Staff College.
Really?
In Canberra. And loved it. That was a great
job. Your station in Germany, what were you doing there?
I was the operations officer. So I was the S3. I ran the day-to-day operation of the armor battalion. And that was interesting in Kosovo.
Yeah.
So, um, and then after Australia, I got the professor of military science job at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, and that's where I retired from. And that's how I ended up at the food bank there in Mobile.
Really?
Yeah,
That's fantastic, man.
because my wife, we loved it in Mobile.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great little city. And we had bought our first house because we always lived on post, so
Yeah.
we never bought a house while we were on active duty, except there. And she loved it there, and we thought we'd retire there. That really was the plan.
So Mobile is where you retired at.
Right.
What brought you back to Florida?
So I was running the day-to-day operations of the food bank, and did a good job. I mean, people ask me all the time, so how'd you go from the military to a food bank?
Yeah.
Like I said, that's 180 degrees difference. And I said, well, the principles of leadership don't change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I don't care what profession you are. The things you do that you're successful in one of them will work in the other. Now, you may have to change how you communicate with people and
right.
those kinds of things. And I certainly did. But I was successful. When I started at the food bank, we were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year. 2 years later, when I handed it off, we were handing out 3.8 million. We doubled the size of the truck fleet, and I almost doubled the size of the staff. But while I was doing that, a guy that was at Brigade when I was in ROTC, he was at Brigade, which is stationed at Fort Hunter Army Airfield. He was the S3 there. And so he saw how I tripled the size of my ROTC program in 3 years. And he took over as the professor of military science at Embry-Riddle. And so one day he called me and he said, Oak, I got a proposition for you. He said, I've got part of my program is Stetson University, and we got 15 cadets out there. He said, come work for me, run part of my program, do the recruiting and everything for that. He said, because if you don't come out here and grow it, I'm going to shut it down. He said, it's not worth my effort for 15 cadets. I'll just bring the cadets to Embry-Riddle.
I didn't know Stetson had an ROTC program.
Actually, the ROTC program at Stetson was the original program that both UCF and Embry-Riddle's program came out of. Back in the 60s. Back in the 60s, Stetson was commissioning 35, 40 lieutenants a year during the Vietnam War. And then they started Embry-Riddle and they started UCF's program as satellite programs to Stetson. Then about in the 80s, Stetson had changed and it started to drop. And so the two, UCF grew and Embry-Riddle grew. And so they made Stetson part of Embry-Riddle's program. So I said, yeah, well, I came over. That was September. The end of September, beginning of October. So my wife and I came over here to take a look at the program and the school. And her mom lived in Winter Park at the time.
Okay.
And her dad lived in Orlando. And her brother lived in, I think, Lake Mary.
Okay.
So she had family here. And my son was in the Army. My daughter was getting married, living there in Mobile. So besides, being close to my daughter, there really wasn't anything else to keep us there.
Right.
And then we came over. We loved it. We got here. We decided that, yeah, we really do like it here. That was the beginning of October. We bought a house in a week and was going to take ownership of it the 3rd of January. So I went back, handed in my notice that December was going to be my last month at the food bank. And then we moved over here, and that was January 2011. So we've been here for now 13 and a half years.
Oh, man.
And we love it here.
Oh, I bet. You don't have to worry about no cold. Well, we get a little cold, you know. It's
Florida
so funny.
cold.
Yeah, we get Florida cold. People are like, "Does it get cold there?" It gets a little chilly.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll get some nights it'll drop down to
Into
the 30s.
freezing.
Yeah,
It's hit a couple times since I've been here. It's been freezing, but then it warms right back up in the day. So
yeah, and that's when you get sick. That's when the weather hits you down here.
That's right.
One day there's that guy online. He does these little videos. He's like, comes outside and it's freezing. He comes out with a jacket and he's like, no, it's not freezing. You gotta take your jacket off. It's like 90 degrees that quick.
Well, all my buddies back in Illinois who I grew up with that still live there, they said, how can you live in Florida with hurricanes? And I said, well, at least with a hurricane, you get a week's notice. If you want to leave, you can leave.
Yeah.
I said, I grew up like you did in Northern Illinois, where tornadoes, you get 15 minutes notice if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And I lived in California where you get no notice for earthquakes. I said, I think I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, man, these tornadoes lately.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's some monsters out there.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, the devastation that some of these cities and towns have gone through, it's just, I'm lost for words.
Yeah.
It's
well,
sad.
the thing that kind of struck me, because I lived through lots of tornadoes and destruction in towns around us, but it's very narrow. It's very compact, the area that it affects. When I first got down here, when I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a lieutenant, Hurricane Hugo hit Charleston. And that was my first time really deploying anywhere. We were one of the closest units, so they deployed us to Charleston to help after Hurricane Hugo. And when I was driving through and I saw pine trees that were snapped off like toothpicks.
Yeah.
And then I got out there and there were whole barrier islands that were just, every structure was gone. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah. I watched a video where a bunch of people were running into a store and it was just like, there was barely anything. And then all of a sudden it just comes through like a freight train, like they say, and wham, everything's done. It's gone. And the building across the street was completely gone. The cars that were parked out front were totally gone. I was like, holy Christ, man. That's scary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they call, I guess, like Leonardwood runs through, I guess, that tornado alley.
Yeah.
And never seen anything when I was there, but it's wild. It's definitely
we
wild.
lived through tornadoes at Fort Knox in Kentucky and at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas.
Okay.
Both places we had tornadoes go through there when we were stationed there. Luckily, it didn't affect us, but it certainly affected some towns around those posts.
Can you describe your experience during that, Hugo?
Yeah. So here I'm an infantry lieutenant at that point. I had switched over to armor. So here I'm an infantry lieutenant. I got 32 guys that I'm responsible for. And they pull up into Charleston. Like I said, we saw the devastation going from the interstate to the city of Charleston, and no electricity still. They put us in old buildings in what used to be the naval station at Charleston, but they had closed that, but the buildings were still there. And here you got 15 guys sleeping in a room, not much bigger than this. We're just sleeping on the ground, on the floor. And then once we got settled there, they put us on the truck and they took us to this warehouse. And they said, you're going to run the night shift for this warehouse. I said, I'm an infantry lieutenant. What? I don't know anything about running a warehouse. And he said, figure it out, Lieutenant. And so I did. My platoon sergeant and I sat down. We figured out how we were going to do that. And we did. And we did that for, I think we were there for 3 months.
We
were there. And just ran. Initially, we were taking stuff in to the warehouse as people were donating stuff. And I mean,
so like all kinds of goods that were needed.
But wood, everything from wood to clothes.
Okay.
People were donating clothes, and we we figured out where we were going to store things in the warehouse. And then as things had to go out, and we kept track of what we collected. And then as things were going out, we'd keep track of what we handed out to who. And
did you guys deal with any of the bull crap where people were trying to break in, steal crap?
We always had somebody there at the
Okay.
warehouse. I mean, it was manned 24 hours a day. So
Yeah.
one platoon did it 12 hours. We did it the next 12 hours.
Yeah.
And so we really didn't have that. And it was it was on the naval base, or what used to be the naval base. So you didn't have people just walking around.
Yeah.
They had to have a reason to be on
that's the
base.
thing that really irks me, is when you go through something catastrophic like that, and then you get the scum of the earth comes out, and
Sure.
they want to loot.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
they want to try and get what they can get for
Yep.
free. It's just
Yeah.
Man.
Well, and I kind of ran into that at the food bank as well. You'd be out handing out food to people, and some of the people coming up, they'd pull up in a Cadillac Escalade, brand new Escalade, and you're like, some of my people that work for me said, they don't need it. I said, that's not your call.
Yeah.
That's not our call. And the phrase I used to use was, sometimes you got to feed the greedy to feed the needy.
Yeah.
And not for us to decide. If they show up, give them the food.
Right. Yeah. It's not worth the aggravation.
No, it is.
How does disaster relief operations compare to combat missions?
It's actually harder.
Is it?
In my opinion. I mean, combat, it's what you train for.
Okay.
That's what, my whole time as a lieutenant, I was training to go to Desert Shield.
Right. You're not training for
not training to run a warehouse or to do whatever else you might have to do during disaster relief. But I will tell you that did help me during my time in Kosovo, because in Kosovo, we were doing kind of a little bit of everything.
Okay.
There were times when we kicked in doors and apprehended people. There were times when we were handing out food.
You did that personally?
Yes. Here, I'll tell you a story. Us and the Russians, because the Russians battalion was right next to our sector. They didn't fall under us, but we had a joint border. And so they were there just for the Serbs. That's it. I mean, they did not like the Albanians, and the Albanians didn't like them. But we were doing a cordon and search, looking for the 3 bad guys, and they happened to be Albanian at this point. And so we did a joint cordon and search with the Russian battalion, and I think there were 179 buildings in this town, and so I got the satellite picture of it, and I labeled all of the buildings, and we looked at doors and windows and everything where we thought people could go in and out, and we cordoned it off, and we went and searched every single building for these 3 guys and weapons, and we found all kinds of weapons and everything else. But I thought I had an idea where they were, and so I kind of stationed myself right outside that building with my just me and my driver and my bodyguard, my personal security guys. And sure enough, there was a door I didn't see, and 3 guys run out this door, and they take off running. And so I took off running after them, and everybody else kind of falling behind me, and they ran into this building, and they shut the door. And as they shut the door, I kicked the door in, and I had my M16, and I put it on them, and they laid down. Luckily, they didn't have anything to shoot me with, or I probably wouldn't be here. And my security detail walks in, and they zip cuffs them. And then he turns around and looks at me, and he said, "Sir, if you ever do that again, I will shoot you myself." He said, "My job's to get you home. I can't do that if you do stupid stuff like that."
Oh, you're like, shit, I'm not letting these boys go. Run these some bitches down.
So, yeah. So I got to do some of that. But then we were also feeding people.
Yeah.
And we were, I was also running meetings with first the Serbs or just Albanians, trying to make life better for them. And then I started doing joint meetings, which were always interesting, when you had Albanians and Serbs in the same meeting trying to figure out, okay, how do we fix this? You know, and every meeting would start off at the beginning. For the last 2,000 years, they did this to me. And I finally said, look, I'm a history major. I know both of you did bad things.
These are the languages that always sound like they're yelling.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, and it's just that doesn't help them either.
It doesn't.
Oh man, how many interactions like that did you have while you were there?
Oh, I had a meeting almost every day.
Well, I mean the running down guys.
Oh, I think that only happened to me twice.
Really?
Yeah, where I watched it, but only twice was I actually involved in kicking a door in. Yeah. My guys didn't like that.
They didn't like that. Oh, get back here! You were what? You were second lieutenant?
No, at that point I was a major.
Oh, you were a major. Oh God, I get to see your sergeants are yelling at you. Get your ass back.
Yeah, they were not happy.
Oh man,
they were not.
That's crazy. Oh,
and you know that the guy who was in charge of my security detail, unfortunately, I stayed in contact with him afterwards for a couple years, and then unfortunately he was killed in the second invasion of Iraq, 2003.
Yeah,
he was killed. But yeah, great young man. I mean, he did a lot of good things for me.
I know a lot of guys that have lost friends and real buddies in the invasion in 2003, and it's crazy, you know, after everything we did, and the shit still keeps hitting the fan. You know, man. So what were the most significant challenges you encountered during Operation Storm?
Logistics. That was huge. When we first got there was no logistics. I mean, we were waiting for stuff to come off the ship. Before we ever invaded, they had built up huge logistics bases. But when we first got there, you know, I tell people I didn't eat anything but an MRE. Got there in August. The first meal I ate that wasn't an MRE was Thanksgiving.
Really?
And I think the second one that I ate that wasn't an MRE was Christmas.
I was going to say.
Then after that, it really started to, you know, they had it all built up, and we were getting stuff like off the shelf.
I know MREs aren't, you know, they're not the tastiest thing, but they do the job.
They do.
And, you know, it's crazy.
And today's MREs are actually the same food that you would buy at a supermarket. The first ones were not.
Yeah. The ones today, but they're missing the little glass Tabasco sauce. You don't get those. I don't even know if you're getting any type of good candy in them anymore.
I don't know. It's been a few years since I ate MRE.
I have 2 cases in my garage as we speak, and I ordered the wrong ones. I have humanitarian aid ones. So I've got lentil stew.
Yeah, you got a lot of the vegetarian.
Yeah. But my kids love them because when I take the boys camping and whatnot, you know, they want the ones that have the taco.
Yeah.
So it comes with the shell, the meat, and everything. And the kids fall in love with that.
Yeah.
I was always the jalapeno cheese and cracker guy.
Yes,
man.
absolutely.
Those were
beef stew was always my favorite.
That was a good one as well. Oh man, but the, you know, getting everything situated over there logistic wise, and, you know, I could just imagine just like only, you know, at least you got that hot Thanksgiving meal and that Christmas meal.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the other thing that was kind of difficult, even for me, was the communication. You know, here my wife's 7 months pregnant. You know, we didn't have cell phone. We didn't have that capability. We would drive out, you know, when she gave birth to our daughter, they got news to me that she was in the hospital, and my boss said, go call. Well, that meant I drove an hour to a phone bank.
Yeah.
To sit and wait my hour and a half for my 15-minute phone call.
God. get more time in jail than you do for a phone call home,
Yeah.
you know.
And then drive
Do you
all the way
remember that
back.
commercial? You know, you're calling, you know, your wife's calling and, you know, she's probably calling you collect. And it's like, yeah, it's Bob. It's a baby. It's a boy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
one of those
exactly.
quick, all right, decline, you know.
Yeah.
But man, how hard was it mentally for you being over there and your child being born at
Yeah.
home?
I think, you know, that certainly that played a part. I mean, it weighed on me that she was there but she wasn't by herself. Her mom
Right.
came down, so I mean, and her sister, so she had people to help her. But not seeing my daughter till she was 5 months old, I mean, that weighed on me, you know. And the funny part of that is the day I got home. The day I got home is we put the baby to bed. We wake up the next morning, and my wife said, "What happened?" And she went in there, and the baby's there, alive. And she said that's the first time that she has slept through the night. Was the first night I got
home.
Yeah,
That's wild. Man. You know,
and I said to my wife, I said, "See, this isn't all that hard." Not the right thing to say.
yeah. Just, oh God. You know, I couldn't imagine being away from, you know, my wife being pregnant and, you know, doing that. And
Yeah. Well, you know, you do what you have to
but
do.
you do.
Yeah.
But, you know,
It doesn't make it fun, and it
No,
doesn't
it
make it
doesn't.
easy, but you realize that that's what you signed up for.
You guys been together how many years total?
37 years now.
Okay.
It'll be 38 in January. So 37 and a half years.
And you said did you meet during your ROTC together?
Yeah, we were in ROTC together. Didn't date. The
Mhm.
whole 2 years we were there in the program together. We didn't
Really?
date.
No.
There was a couple times I wanted
Mhm.
to ask her out, but she was going out with somebody, or when
Okay.
she wasn't, I was. So it just never worked out. And 2 weeks after she graduated, because like I said, she graduated 6 months before I did. I called her up and asked her out on a date, and we went on a date. I think that was May 14th. We were engaged on the 2nd of July, and we were married in January.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shotgun.
Yeah. Well, you know, we knew each other. You know, we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
So didn't play any games. She knew who I was. I knew who she was. And I can tell you, after the first date, I kind of knew that she was the one I was going to marry. If she said yes.
Yeah. Now, so your role in the military, you had an idea, a plan in your head. Am I correct? Like, this is it. This is what I'm doing.
I knew this is what I wanted to do.
This is every single day for the rest of my life till they say, "Hey, Oak, you're out of here." What about your wife?
No, I don't think she had any plan on doing it forever. You know, she was a nurse. She knew she'd go out anytime and get a job.
She do her schooling through the military, or did she do that prior to?
No, she was on an Army ROTC scholarship, so they paid for her schooling. Last 3 years of schooling.
Okay.
And so she had her 8-year service obligation. And really, she only had 5 that she had to do on active duty, but we were gonna do it until I made captain. And we actually sat down and planned my daughter's birth so that she could give birth, go on maternity leave, and sign out of the Army. And we hit it. And then stop loss happened. And so she couldn't get out of the Army.
Wow.
And that's why she had that while I was deployed. She had the 5 months by herself with our son and our daughter.
When you guys were stationed in Germany and you left Germany for Kosovo.
All right.
And how was the, adapting to living there?
So in Germany, it was we lived on post.
Okay.
So unless you wanted to intermingle with the Germans, you really didn't have to, except the ones that worked on post, and all of them spoke English.
Yeah.
Whether or not they would or not, it's a different story. But they all did speak English. Almost every German speaks English because they take it. It's required. Now, a lot of them won't speak English to you, but that's a different story. So unless you wanted to go out and intermingle with the Germans, you really didn't have to. And she did. She enjoyed it. My wife's one of those that picks up languages very, very quickly, and so she actually picked up a little German while we were there. But so it wasn't too bad living on post for that piece, and so I didn't feel quite as bad leaving at that point to go to Kosovo. One, because I knew an end date. Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we didn't know an end date.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Who knew? Nobody knew. But in Kosovo, I knew we were going to be there for 9 months.
Yeah.
At the end of that 9 months, I was coming home. Interesting story. So me, my wife, my son, and my daughter have all been to Paris. None of us together. So my wife went. My wife went when she was in college. I went on that first 6-month deployment without the family.
Right.
I had a weekend. They were doing a weekend to Paris and Normandy, so I did that. And then my son and daughter both went during their 5th grade field trip while they were in Germany.
Really?
They went for a week long, stayed at a little camp and did day trips into Paris and went to the museums and whatever.
You know, it would have been cool if they were older and you guys all had a picture of a spot that you were at.
Yeah, that would have been.
And everybody goes to that spot and gets a picture. Then you take that picture and then just collage it together. That would have been cool. You know? Yeah. Oh man. I had a buddy of mine who was Air Force. He was stationed in Holland, and he was part of the motor pool. And it was funny. He was getting ready to be coming home, but he had to do a tour of duty. And so they sent him to Italy to drive a bus to pick up bomber pilots. Yeah. That's all he had to do.
Vicenza.
Yeah. He just, and that was it. I think he did I don't know. I think it was 3 months.
Yeah.
And then he finished out that and he was able to come stateside.
Yeah. I mean, but people always ask, so how did your kids handle moving every 2 years? And I can't say they enjoyed it when we were doing it, because they always had to leave their friends. Of course, not too long into it, they all had, internet and everything else, so they could keep in touch with people, unlike when we were young.
Pen and paper, baby.
Yeah, but
snail mail.
But the thing that they will now tell you is that they really benefited from it, because they can walk into any room, not know anybody, and they can strike up a conversation with anybody because they had to. They were always the new people in town. So that was one of the benefits. And then my daughter told a story one time when she was a freshman in college. She was taking an art appreciation class, and one of the things they threw up was a picture of the Mona Lisa. And the professor said, "How many people have actually seen the Mona Lisa?" And my daughter said there were 3 of us that raised our hand: her, an Air Force officer's daughter, and a Navy's officer's son. Those were the only 3 people out of 500 kids, because that's the class they teach in a big auditorium, that had actually seen the Mona Lisa.
Wow.
Because my kids have gotten to do some amazing things.
Oh, I bet.
We scuba dived in the Red Sea. We snorkeled on the Great Barrier Reef. They've been to the pyramids. They got to go all over Europe and Venice and all those places, Rome. So, I mean, they've gotten to see some pretty amazing things.
What would you say is one of the most outstanding places that you've been that you enjoyed the most being?
So my favorite city in the world is Prague.
Okay.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Right after I got back from Kosovo, my wife's mother came over and spent some time with our kids. And Kel and I took a weekend and went to Prague. And it wasn't too long after, the wall came down 92, 93. So this was 2000, so 8 years. and I don't think they had figured out what they had yet. I'm not sure that it's this way anymore there, but because I haven't been back, would love to go back. But we stayed in a really nice hotel for almost nothing. And then we asked the people in the hotel, what's the best restaurant in town? And they told us, and we went there. And I ordered a steak, and I forget what my wife ordered, and we ordered a bottle of wine, and they brought us the check, and it was $23.
Good Lord, man. Can't eat like that now.
You couldn't eat like that anywhere else.
Steak costs $23.
Yeah.
And that's in the store.
Yeah.
I kid you not. Last night, was it last night or the other night? I went and got 3 New York strips.
Yeah.
It's $36.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
at the store.
Yeah.
I mean, that costs you $45, $50 at a restaurant.
Per steak.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's like my son, he's like, Dad, can we go to Texas Roadhouse? I'm like, I am not paying freaking $25 for you to eat a pork chop.
Yeah.
You know,
and
that's what he
would.
wants. You know, it's crazy. This inflation shit it's killing us.
Yeah.
Man.
If we don't get it under control here pretty quick, we're in trouble.
Yeah. It is nuts. I mean, there used to be this thing. I don't know if you remember these, but you can go into a supermarket or maybe at a fair, and it was like a computer, and you would punch in your birthday and the year you were born and whatnot, and they would give you a printout of what was happening in the world.
Oh, I do remember that.
And it was,
and you can actually get a book.
Yeah.
That will tell the year you were born, what happened that year.
Tell you who was president, who was vice president, how much a gallon of milk cost, how much a pound of ground beef cost,
and a car.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, my mom and dad's first house that they bought was a 2-story wooden house in town there, and 3 bedrooms. It only had 1 bath, but 3 bedrooms. They paid $29,500 for it. You can't even buy a car for that.
No. Oh my! I like looking up old stuff like that because it's you could buy a house back in the day through Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah, I think I actually lived in one. That was built.
I believe there are still a few of those homes around, still alive and pushing strong. But you could literally. Everything came from that catalog, all the way down to the claw tub.
Yeah.
Anything and everything.
Nails, everything.
And they had everything broken down and accounted for
you.
I hated to be that guy in that warehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you imagine running that warehouse?
Can you describe your role and achievements as the associate director at the Bay Area Food Bank?
Yeah. So I took over that job about a month, maybe a month and a half before the BP oil spill in the Gulf. And the food bank I was running the day-to-day operations was a big food bank. It covered 52 counties along the Gulf Coast. So the whole Gulf Coast of Mississippi, the whole Gulf Coast of Alabama, and about a third of the panhandle of Florida. So all those people that made their living out in the Gulf weren't making a living in the Gulf during the BP oil spill. They shut it down. So people who shrimped, fishermen, fish guides, all that, not only the people that had to go out into the Gulf, but then all the canneries along that coast shut down because there was no food coming in for them to can. So we had a lot of people who were looking for food, looking for help.
Now, the food that you would get, would it be donated or would you purchase? Or
so a little bit of 3
both?
things. We did purchase some food. There were a couple major grocery stores, distribution centers that fed into grocery stores that would give us a discount when we bought it, and we bought some that way. Then Publix and Winn-Dixie and Walmart and those stores, they would donate some food to us. And then the government gave us some canned goods, some cheese, those type of things, milk. And so we'd bring it all together, and then we would distribute it out to smaller, what I called food pantries, not really food banks, like at a church or a community food pantry. And then we would hand it out to them, and then they would distribute it. And then we also, one of the things I really started that I increased. We did a little bit of it, but I increased the amount was direct food handout to communities because we had to. I mean, Bila Battery is a small little town, and that just I spent so much time down there because nobody in that town basically worked anymore because they couldn't. And I used to tell people, look, they're used to disasters. They're used to hurricanes. But a hurricane they know how to deal with. They fix whatever was broken and then they get right back to work. They can't fix this. Until that oil is gone and they lift the ban on going out there, they're out of luck. There's nothing they can do. And so we spent a lot of time there handing out food.
Did you see a lot of that firsthand?
I did. I went out every day that we had a food handout. I went out and ran it.
Yeah.
And again, you had some great people that would help you. Even the people that were getting food, they would help you, and they would do the things they had to do to help make the handout go well. You had some that didn't. I remember we were in Bila Battery handing out food, and we had a huge food handout this time. We brought a whole semi truck load full of food. And so I knew that truck was coming. And so the park people started coming in early. And so I asked two guys, I said, can you go just stand out there and make sure nobody parks between these two spots so that we got room to bring the semi trailer in and unload it? And one guy said, absolutely. And he walked right out there. The other guy said, absolutely not. And I said, why? He said, I didn't come here to work. I came here to get food. I said, well, I can't prevent you from getting food. You'll get food today. I said, but I can make sure that you are the last person to get food. And he was.
Man.
I mean, come on.
Why you go bite the hand that feeds you? You know what I mean? It's just, good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, but there's people out there like that.
There truly are. And I've seen a lot of that firsthand. And I've seen people who don't have a dime will do anything and everything and give you the shirt off of their back and ask for nothing in return. But then I also know that person who can push a broom for you for 20 feet out front of your house. And then aren't you going to pay me?
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
like, come on, man.
But I think that was part of it. Increasing the amount of food we handed out was one of the accomplishments I'm proud of. But I think one of the things that helped us do that, some of the other things I did, I helped bring some technology into the food bank.
Like what?
So we went to Feeding America, which is the mother food bank that runs just about every food bank in the U.S., a lot of them. And we said, when we send a truck out to pick up food or drop off food, I have no idea where they are from here to there. I mean, I come up with a route that they're supposed to use, but I don't know if they're on that route or where they're at on that route. So they purchased, or I think FedEx gave it to them, the same system they use to track their trucks, so that at any one time I knew where my truck was. And I didn't do it so I could follow where they were on a daily basis. I didn't care if they did something, if they stopped and do whatever. I just wanted to know that if some store called and said, hey, we've got this big amount of food that we need to get rid of, do you want it? That I knew where the closest truck was, that I could send them over there and pick it up.
Gotcha.
And so that helped out a lot. And it also allowed us to make sure that we were doing our deliveries smart, that we weren't wasting time and gas. And, it would tell us if we put in there, we got to make these 15 stops, it would tell us, okay, the best way to do it is this.
How much of that food that you collected would last and not expire?
We used almost all of it.
Really?
Very, very little. We had 2 huge freezers, so we could even get milk and freeze the milk as soon as we brought it back. And our trucks were refrigerated.
Okay.
Some of them were. The ones, that's the ones we sent to pick up that kind of stuff. There were some that weren't refrigerated.
Okay, so you had the reefers and
And Walmart, you can badmouth Walmart all you want, and there's bad things that,
Yeah.
but they gave us 2 brand new trucks, gave them to us, and an annual salary for the driver for 1 year for each of those trucks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And not to mention how much food they gave us.
Yeah.
I mean, they get all the time we were getting food from them. So I mean, we couldn't have done some of the things we did without the help we got from Walmart and from Feeding America. We did some repair, did some upgrade to the freezers while I was there. So yeah, I mean, it was challenging for me because I was dealing with civilians for the first time in 25 years, 23 years. And it was just something new, but I took the challenge and said, yeah, I can do this. And
you did it.
And I did.
And you actually did it a little bit better.
Yeah.
You were able to,
but again, I think one, we had to change what we were doing because of the BP oil spill. Would we have made some of the changes if that hadn't been the case? I don't know. Because I don't know if that would have, if the need would have come up, or that even the thought of changing things would have come up. Because we're all creatures of habit. We like to do things the same way, no matter what. And that was one of my hardest problems at the food bank, was breaking their mindset that, well, that's not the way we used to do it. I said, okay, but it's the way we're going to do it from this point on.
Oh man, let's if you don't mind, let's dive into your book here a little bit. So, how long on the burner was this?
I think it was probably 10 years, 15 years.
Really?
Yeah, I thought about writing it, and it's funny because I thought about writing it for so long. And then what really gave me the catalyst to do it, my wife and I and her mom and 2 people that live in the condo with us, in the same condo with us, we went to this motivational / how do we revitalize the Catholic Church talk at our Catholic church. And it was a 3-hour long program. Now, the guy who spoke, who was a fantastic speaker, he didn't speak all 3 hours. He would speak for 45 minutes, take a 15-minute break. So he did that 3 times. And every time he took a break, I went up and I was picking his brain because he was doing what I wanted to do, get out and talk to people. And so every chance I got up and talked to him. And then at the end, we kind of said our goodbyes, and and I got some great nuggets out of him that I've used since then. But we said our goodbyes, and he turned around and started walking away. And then he kind of stopped and he turned around and he said, "Oak, have you written a book?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about it. Not yet, but I'm thinking about it." And he looked at me and he said, "Stop thinking about it and write it." And I went home that night and I wrote out the table of contents. And then I started writing the next day. That was the 15th of February. Started writing it on the 16th, 2020, and I published it on the 12th of February, 2021. So just under a year from the time I started till the time I published it.
That's fantastic. And I tell you what, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but what makes a good leader?
Yeah. So I think
I know we talked a little bit earlier about some of this, but
yeah, I think a good leader has to understand that it's not about them. So I think selfless service is the first thing that you got to understand if you want to be a good leader. It's not about you, and yet it's all about you. It's not about you in your privileges, your pay, your title, but it's all about you and how you treat and empower the people you have a privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the leader.
So there's a little section here. The best leaders are the ones who have the sense to surround themselves with outstanding people and have self-resistant, not to meddle in how they do their jobs.
Yeah.
Good leaders will train their people to do their jobs and trust them to do their jobs correctly.
Yeah. So I just had this conversation the other day with somebody, not even on a show, just somebody local that asked me about it. And I said, look, good leaders, number one, they build a good culture. in the organization they're leading. And that's the leader's job. I mean, I always tell people culture is the shadow of the leader. Whatever you do, you are allowing other people to do. So you got to set that standard. Then you got to train people to the standard that you expect them to meet. How can you hold somebody to a standard if you didn't train them to it?
Exactly.
But I see it all the time. Then a good leader, when gives them the vision of what it is they want at the end of this. Like when you hand out a project, when I hand out a project to somebody, I've already trained them. I know they're going to operate within my culture that I have established. So then I give them the vision. At the end of this project, this is what it needs to look like. Then I give them the resources that they need, time, money, people, equipment, whatever. And then I give them the authority to make it happen. And that's where a lot of leaders fall down, is you got to give them that authority to make it happen. Because otherwise, how do they get to do things? And then you got to get out of their way and let them do it. And the analogy I always use is, if I give you a project and the goal is to get to 9, how do I care how you got to 9? 7 plus 2 is 9, but so is 6 plus 3, and 5 plus 4, and 8 plus 1. I don't care how you get to 9. Get me to 9.
Right.
Will they do it the way you would have done it? Absolutely not. Who cares?
Yeah, that's just get you there.
Yeah.
That's it, man. Oh, man.
And let them figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll be absolutely amazed at what they do.
When I started this podcast months ago, I sit back and I do the dumb thing, and I listen to my old podcast, and I'm like, holy shit. I can't talk. I'm mumbling. I'm doing it with no camera, and I'm just sitting on a couch with a horrible microphone or a head, one of the little earpieces.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to talk into my phone, but my thing is like, I wanted to do this for many, many years, for a long time. And I felt like I didn't have the balls to do it.
Right.
Then I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm going to keep pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself. Then I've reached out to other people and other podcasters and whatnot. And I've gotten some really good comments and feedbacks back from other people. And it feels good. And I noticed the increase of getting to where I need to get. But I also have the support of other people as well. So, and it's just like, I'm not doing it all by myself, but I am getting some help and whatnot from other people. Then I started reaching out to more people to sit face to face, because I feel as though when you and I sit here face to face, you get such a better connection compared to me staring at this damn screen.
Absolutely.
And
well, that's like me with my speaking. I do both virtual and in person. I much preferred in person, because you get to draw on the energy of the audience. You get to look them in the eye. You can tell whether or not they're understanding what you're saying. And, it's always nice to see that light bulb go off. And you see that sometimes. But, one of the things that to exactly what you're talking about is, I tell leaders all the time 2 things. You got to put your ego aside. I don't care how long you've been doing what you're doing. You don't have all the answers. You don't have all the skills. You don't have all the knowledge or ability. Use the people that you have the privilege to lead. Use their skills, their knowledge, their ability. Yeah. And number 2 is reflection, which is kind of what you're saying, because you don't learn anything from experience.
No.
The experience, because that has emotion in it. You're not learning. Yeah. That's either painful or good. That's it.
Yep.
The way you learn from experience is through reflecting on that. What did I do? What was I supposed to do? What did I do? What did I actually do? What did I do well? What didn't I do so well? And how do I get better at it? And I don't care, even if you were successful at what you were doing, you can still get better at it.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to put your ego aside, and you got to reflect. I will tell you that when I added reflection to my daily life, it has made a huge difference. That's the last thing I do before I go to bed at night, is I think, okay, I do the exact same thing in the morning, and I do the exact same thing before I go to bed. I can't control a lot what happens during the day, but I can
Right.
control when I get up and I control when I go to bed. So when I get up, I listen to the daily mass. I read a couple of chapters of the Bible, and I do my daily prayers. Then I'm ready for whatever happens to me during the day. Then at night, I write in my journal.
Mm-hmm.
I read something, either a couple pages of the book I'm reading or an article or whatever that I think I need to read. And then I reflect on what I did that day. That's the last thing I do before I close my eyes.
That's so great, man. That's honestly, that's fantastic. And I started doing a little bit more of that. I started to get to a point where I need to stop looking at others, I guess you could say, success.
Right.
Focus on myself, focus on my steps to get to where I need to go, and stop trying to,
you can't be them.
Yeah. I can't compare myself to them. I'm not going to be them. I want to be me. I want to do my thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like my podcast, thank you so much for listening. I deeply appreciate it. If you don't, okay, that's cool. Go
listen to somebody else's.
That's how it is. And it's,
so I absolutely agree with that. And I tell people all the time, look, you should want to be the best at whatever you do, but you got to be the best you at what you do.
Exactly.
You can't be the best somebody else. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
I mean, I'm no Joe Rogan. I'm no other guy.
And that's okay.
Yeah. But I get a connection with people when I sit down and talk to people. I'm a people person. Yeah. I love to talk to people. Yeah. I want to hear your story. You tell me your story. That's why I was like, come on over, sit down, sit in front of me. Let's talk. And you just get such a better connection and a better role.
Like I said, this is the first time I've done it this way. Out of the 181 podcasts I've been on, this is the 182nd podcast I've been on. And this is the first time I've actually done it face to face like this. I've done live shows, but never face to face. And you're right. I mean, it's no comparison.
There isn't.
None.
No, there isn't. And it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it truly is. Because I've done podcasts where I'm doing them through the computer screen, and I just feel so. I don't think the conversation's going good or whatnot, but then I hear, oh, this was a great conversation and everything. And I'm like, but I'm sitting here also trying to control. I'm a one-man show. I don't, I'm not fortunate enough to have a guy sitting on the side. Yeah. With a switcher and stuff. And I'm sitting here with my mouse and I'm trying to click back and forth to make sure everybody's lined up and good and whatnot. Yeah. So like I right before you got here, I'm in here and I'm checking this light, making sure this light's good and everything's perfect, because
it's all on you.
Yeah, it's all on me. So if anybody to blame, I blame myself. And but I just think it's fantastic. Now you do a lot of events as well, am I correct? Where you go out and you pretty much.
So I'm on the speaking circuit now, and that's really what I do now. I retired from my day job, and this is what I do. And and the thing that I really like, because somebody asked me the other day, said, so what's the people that you generally speak, what organization? I said, I don't have one. I said, I do a lot of first responders, which you would imagine. In fact, next week I'm headed to Michigan to talk to all the police chiefs in the state of Michigan. Just got done with all the fire chiefs in the state of Washington 2 weeks ago. But I've also done HR conferences. I've done fiduciary association conferences, did a healthcare risk management.
What the hell is that?
So fiduciary association and there's only 3 associations that are accredited in the United States. One is in California, one's in Arizona, and I think the other one's in Utah.
Okay.
And so as people go into nursing homes, they kind of can't handle their own financial and all that. There's people who are trained to do that. And obviously,
almost like an executor.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Of your life. So, let's say I live across the country from my mom and I can't do it for her on a day-to-day basis. You can have this fiduciary association that will do it, kind of manage the day-to-day operation.
It's gonna be scary though.
Oh, it does. It does. And you understand, and they do go through a lot of training, and you've got to again, integrity. They got to have that integrity piece because they're taking care of people's life savings.
Exactly.
But so I've talked to all kinds of people, and I love that. Love talking to young people. I love going to universities. I think I've been at 5 universities now. Never turned down a chance to talk to young people because they are our future.
Yeah.
We are going to reap what we sow. I promise you.
We are.
And if we don't do a good job, we're the only people to blame.
Yeah. Now, I guess what do you consider a boomer?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I was born in 63. I think 64 was the last year of the boomers.
So I am 74. So I'm a Gen X.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because, like you're saying, we're looking up to what's possibly out there now. And I'm not going to lie. It's scary as shit.
It is scary.
And
now, having said that, I spent the last 15 years recruiting for Army ROTC, and I can tell you there are some absolutely amazing young men and women out there. They're getting further and further apart.
They are.
Very few as opposed to when I first started 15 years ago. I mean, I get a crop of young men and women. Great, most of them. Now it's getting a lot harder.
Did you see this thing online? Speaking of young men and women, I don't know how exact this is, but you have to register when you're 18.
Yeah.
I guess there's some changing of the guard going on this.
Yeah. They're talking about doing it automatically.
Yeah.
Because I guess so many young men aren't registering anymore.
Yeah. So now
because they decoupled it from financial aid from college. Used to be you couldn't get government financial aid unless you were signed up for the selective service at 18. Then they decoupled that, so a lot of people are saying, "I'm not signing up," and they didn't. So I did read where they were talking about making it automated.
Yeah,
and I think it's still only males right now, but they're But
I don't know. It's kind of the kid. It's just crazy because I talk so much about this, and I hate repeating myself, but kids today, man, they just don't. I don't think they get it. They just don't understand. Like, I've said this times before, when I was a kid, I grew up playing in the woods, playing guns, playing army, playing this, playing that.
Yeah.
And that was
leaving the house at 7:00 in the summertime, not coming back till it was dark.
Until the lights came on outside. And that's what we did. I mean, we painted scullies in the street and played bottle caps.
Yeah.
And, my kids, was a couple summers ago, they were like, what's that, Dad? I'm like, all right, come on. And my daughter has a box of chalk outside down by the mailbox, and I'm out there and I'm drawing this big thing, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. And then I'm weighing the bottle caps, I'm putting in a penny and I'm weighing it, pouring in some hot wax to level it out and smooth it out so we can shoot it and you get that distance. And the kids had a blast with that. And it's just like,
I remember playing marbles as a kid.
Oh yeah, man, marbles and kick the can.
Yeah.
But kids today, it's all electronic and whatnot, and it's kind of scary, but it's kind of cool at the same time, because I did a little podcast with my son. It's called Getting Schooled. So I don't know a lot of the video game. I'm old school video game, like Atari, Nintendo, the original stuff.
Yeah.
I cannot handle a PS5 controller and all these games and whatnot. And he's like, Dad, you want to play? I'm like, I will watch, but I'm not going to play. But
even take it a step further than that, when I'm having problems with my iPhone, who do I call?
Your kid.
Yeah, exactly. Or my computer. If something messed up on my computer, I call my son. I say, how do I fix this? And he tells me. I would never have figured that out.
I mean, I'm dumb. I'm not dumb or stupid when it comes to like my computer and whatnot. Yeah. I'm pretty easy getting through it and stuff. But there are some things I'm like, I gotta watch a YouTube video first. I'm like, all right, how are we doing this? Let's get this figured out. But Oak, I'm so thankful you came out, man.
Oh, this has been fantastic. I like I said, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I've enjoyed a lot of podcasts, but this has really been fun. Really has been.
Yeah, it was, and I enjoy it, and I hopefully I get to get you back here on your next book.
You said, just tell me when.
You got another book on the works.
I'm working on I give another keynote talk. Right now I have 3 keynote talks. I have my leadership talk. Then I have one on success. I call it Arm Yourself for Success. And that's going to be my next book. And I've got the table of contents written. I just haven't done it yet.
Get to writing that book.
And then, like we were talking earlier, I've collected quotes all my life, and I'd love to put all my quotes in a book and just have them out there so other people could use them and benefit from them.
Heck yeah, man. That's fantastic. I will have a link to your website and to your book and everything in the descriptions of this podcast. And I'll even add it to my my list of guest books on the website for everydaybspodcast.com. And
that's very nice.
Like
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. But it's honestly, guys, if you guys get a chance, go pick up this book. Go help support Oak. It's a killer book. So Oak, once again, brother, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, my friend. Yes. All right, boys and girls, thanks for tuning in. And thank you so much. Love you guys.